Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us, no matter where you are located in the world today. My name is Meg Alexander. I am part of Power to Fly's hosting team, and I am, as always, excited to join y'all for another fabulous chat and learn session here at Power to Fly. Now, before we talk to and introduce you to our speaker, I just want to go over a couple quick housekeeping items, especially important if maybe you haven't joined us in a while, or maybe this is your first event with us, in which case, hi, welcome. We're so happy to meet you. Now, all of these events are about you. They're about our audience, and we want to make sure that you get value out of these. Now, we encourage you to do that in a couple different ways. You are always welcome to participate. We would love to see your smiling, maskless faces shared with us safely. Now, no need to be Instagram perfect, as I'm sure you can all see, like that is not a requirement today. We do not care if you are coming to us in a ball gown or your bathrobe or a three-piece suit, corner office, living room couch, makes no difference to us. We just want to be there to meet you where you are. So thank you so much for joining us. Now, if you do turn on your camera, no worries about privacy or anything like that. As long as you don't come off mute during today's session, you will not show up on either the live stream or the recording. Now, the other way you can participate is by sending in questions or comments into the group thread. So in the Zoom group chat, you are more than welcome to keep that hopping. In fact, get us started here. I'd love for all of our attendees, let us know where you're joining us from in the world today. I'm coming to you from Ohio. It's land that was traditionally cared for by the indigenous Fox and Kickapoo nations in this area. So if you similarly know where you are or whose land you're on, let us know in the chat. I would really love to hear from you all and see how far our global audience spreads. Now, like I said, today's session is being recorded. Ooh, here we go. LA, Brooklyn, Vancouver, DC, oh, Hyderabad, India, Kentucky, Baku. Very cool, y'all. Thank you for chiming into the chat there. Now, if you do want to share questions or comments during the session, we would love to hear from you. Throw those in the group chat. If you have a question that you'd like to ask, but you want to be kept anonymous, not a problem. Just send your question to me in a DM. You can find my name, Meg Alexander, on the drop-down menu in Zoom. Now, last but not least, like I said, today's session is being recorded. And what that means for you is that you don't have to take notes. You get to sit back, relax, and enjoy the great conversation that I'm about to have with Shannon today. Now, just so you're aware, if you do want to rewatch or share this recording after today, let's say Shannon shares something that is just so like mind-blowing, paradigm shift, you're so excited, you have to share it with a friend or a coworker or a relative, you can do so. So in about 1 to 2 business days, we're going to email you with a link to where you can rewatch this recording. That's going to be when it goes up on the Power to Fly website. But if you don't want to wait 1 to 2 business days, you don't have to. You can head over to our YouTube channel. I'll be sharing links for all of this in the chat thread in just a moment here. But you can head over to our YouTube channel. We have the recordings are usually posted there within about 5 to 15 minutes at the end of the live stream. And we have a huge section of our recorded chats available to search there, and you can watch them all for free. So if you don't want to wait to send this video out, that's awesome. You don't have to. But I do recommend, if you are interested in some of our past content, all of this, all of these events are free to watch. All the recordings are free to access. And we would love to share all these resources with you. Everything from the beginning of Chat and Learns to now is on our website. So I very much recommend that you, make the most of those resources. Now, last thing I want to talk about is Power to Fly's mission. So our goal is to try and reach gender parity in the workforce, true representation and inclusion, pay equity. These are high, lofty goals, y'all, but we are not going to get there by ourselves. So if you would like to, we would love to enlist your help in this goal. We want to get our resources into the hands of as many people as possible. And the way that we're going to do that is if you all want to share with your social media network and let people know about the availability of these resources. Now, you don't have to shill for us. You don't have to make a huge, big deal. All you got to do is share some video or a photo or anything and let people know that you are learning with Power to Fly today. If you want to, you're more than welcome to @ us. We are @ Power to Fly on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. And you can also check out our various social channels. We share really great resources. We share Meet the Recruiter videos, interview tips, hot job listings, all kinds of great stuff. So absolutely, take advantage of those and share spread the word, share the wealth, and let people know about these resources that can help us all to advance in our careers. All right, now, last thing before we introduce our speaker. Shannon is here today on behalf of the NBA. Now, I'll be sharing the link to their company page with y'all here in just a moment. And that is the screen that you're looking at right now. Now, what this page is, once you navigate here, there's that in the chat thread for y'all. It's going to look much like what you're seeing on the screen in front of you now. Now that page is where you can search for more information about the NBA, about their values. You can take a look at events, so past events that they have partnered on with us, as well as events that they're going to do with us in the future. And then, as always, you can search and apply to open roles right from that page on powerfly.com. Now, the one thing I do want to highlight for y'all is if you are interested in the NBA and you are, and you are actively job seeking, there's going to be a pink button at the top right-hand corner of that page that says follow. Smash that button. It is going to do some really great things for you. But effectively, what it does is it works like your friend at the NBA. So it's going to let the NBA know that you are interested in working with them even before you fill out a job application. But it's also going to allow Powerfly to take some of the weight off of your shoulders. So we are going to make it so that you don't have to go and keep looking for jobs and look and see when the new postings are set up. We're going to let you know when the NBA posts those new roles. So, let us take some of the weight off of you when it comes to job seeking. The other thing that follow button is good for is if you are interested in the NBA, but maybe not job seeking right now, or just don't see anything that really suits your interest at the moment. So definitely take a look at that. You can follow and unfollow as many companies as you'd like on powertofly.com, as many times as you'd like. But obviously, I recommend that you take a look at the NBA page, learn a little bit more about them, and see some of the things that make that org such a great place to work. Now, I'm very excited to introduce you to Shannon. Shannon Rhodes is currently leading connected devices with the NBA. Now, Shannon joined the league a year and a half ago to architect an in-house solution for consumers across Roku, Xbox, PlayStation, Chromecast, smart TVs, tvOS, Android TV, Amazon Fire TV, etc. And over the past 10 years, Shannon has, her career has spanned various software engineering positions from web to mobile to full stack to direct to consumer applications in the media space, including at ESPN and Disney. Now, Shannon combines a master's degree in computer science and an acute business knowledge to take consumers' applications to the next level. Shannon, we are so happy to have you join the stage with us today. Is there anything else that you think our audience should know about you before we dive into questions?
I don't think so. I think this gives a pretty good summary. Super happy to see so many people joining from around the world, as well as some NBA fans and some of my Brooklyn people. So I love to see that. And I'm super excited for this conversation.
Excellent. Love to see it. All right, so let's get this kicked off. Oh, thank you for doing the spotlighting, Erica. Okay, so let's get this kicked off. We had a lot of questions that came in, but one thing to highlight before we do, if y'all are here on the call today and you sent in a question and you're not sure if we're going to get to it, you are more than welcome to ask it again in the chat. If we're going over one of your questions and there's some more detail or context you think that we could have to give you a good answer, send it on in the chat. If you have questions and you want to dive deeper on an acronym, a term, an idea, anything, let us know, y'all. I am here to make sure that this time is impactful and meaningful for y'all. I can't make sure that you get answers if I don't know what the questions are. So keep them coming. All right, a lot of people wanted to know how you personally got started within the sports industry. A lot of people were worried if there would be opportunities for people who don't necessarily have sports related experience. So what was your background like when you got to the NBA?
Yeah, so I was fortunate. I actually played soccer in college, so I spent a lot of time in the sports arena. I went to Villanova, go Cats, if you like college basketball. And I always wanted to be in sports. I actually wanted to be a college coach originally. And then I kind of fell in love with engineering and got to combine both. But what actually connected me to sports was I did a project in school that was related to football, basically automating the 1st and 10 line using computer vision. And that caught the attention of ESPN. So I think if you're looking to get into the sports world, you don't need to have a sports background in any way. I think it's any way to make a connection to sports So, you do some project on the side, and it doesn't have to be in the engineering space. It could be writing, it could be, a social media account. It could be so many different things. It's just some connection where the MBA, for example, can look and see, oh, I see that this person is invested in basketball. And honestly, for me as a hiring manager, if I have two candidates and one of them is super passionate about, the NBA and the game, it's easier for me to invest in them because I know that they have interest and passion, and hopefully they're going to bring that to the workplace as well. So I think it's just finding a connection to that industry, and it doesn't just apply to sports. If you're applying for a financial job, right, you want something on your resume that really connects in finance. So the same thing is applicable in the sports world.
Yes, I love that. I mean, I kind of liken it to the idea of, you can be a really great waiter or wait staff or even a chef, and you can still be vegan and cook like non-vegan dishes that you don't like to make. Like you're not going to eat them. And honestly, I feel like it's kind of the same way, right? Like everybody has familiarity with sports, even if you are at the point of like, yay, sports ball. Like everybody knows roughly about that culture. So I think that is really wonderful to know that like it can help you in certain areas, but it's not required. And you're right, a lot of us didn't grow up playing sports or didn't have that opportunity to continue it into college. So some of us might be really, really, really far removed from that game of like, playground pickup that was like your favorite thing and that's what got you into sports. So I like
Right.
that.
I just want to add one more thing.
Yeah,
Even
please.
if you don't know anything about sports, any job is really about learning and your ability to take in information and improve. So if you don't understand basketball, but for some reason you want to work at the NBA, that's okay. But take the time to invest in it as well. So start watching games, follow players, whatever it is. A lot of people, the WNBA has a big thing about if you want to learn about the WNBA, just follow one player and kind of see what they're doing and their brand and that sort of thing. It's really just about learning. And there's a ton of sports that I've worked on. When at ESPN, I worked on cricket, Formula One, knew nothing about those sports, but over time, you start learning things. It's the same thing at any job.
Yeah, of course. I mean, when you think about it, like, sports really does get down to that kind of like that base level of people, right? Everybody wants to see somebody win. Everybody wants to be the winner. And so I think you're right. I mean, it really does, kind of reflect any other job. If you were to get a job working for Nabisco, probably you taste a couple cookies at some point, even if you didn't really like them. So, makes some sense. Okay. What is one thing that you wish you had known before you started working in the sports industry?
I think that I didn't really fully understand how the industry worked. Like I come from a tech background, right? So that's a very different space. And so coming to sports companies was definitely really, really different. So one, the 24/7 schedule that exists for pretty much every sport now. You think, oh, it's just the NBA season, like that's all I have to pay attention. No, you have summer league. We have, ball, which is the African league. We have, now we're broadcasting Wembanyama's, all his games. So it just becomes like truly all year round. And I think the scheduling was kind of something you don't think about as much. And so the nature of that, the fast-paced nature, the passion of the fans is just really beyond the normal, work situation. Like no one's really sitting there like, shoot, my social media app doesn't load. Okay, I'll come back to it. But if your game gets messed up in the final 10 seconds, you're really upset. So I think some of that I didn't really see ahead of time coming, as well as, some of the things with sports and tech. I think tech is a very innovative space and the sports world is trying to catch up to that. And so I think one of the things I didn't fully realize is like where sports sat in the tech world. Obviously, I just did this huge project at the NBA to move everything in-house and allow us to innovate in a different way. But I think that was a huge growth opportunity. I didn't really know what was there ahead of time. And I kind of lucked into that with ESPN, who was one of the forward-thinking companies that had a huge digital and tech presence. But just for perspective, the NBA, this whole organization is new. The NFL is also going through a similar transition right now. The MLB was a little bit ahead of the NBA. So I think there's a lot of positions kind of in that space that I didn't really realize. I kind of thought like, oh, like these digital platforms are run by the leagues, but they weren't necessarily.
That's interesting. I had no idea that that's how that worked. So, okay, so you talked a little bit about sports and tech, and this is kind of a personal question from me because as I'm thinking through this, if I'm thinking about sports and tech, other than like the finish lines being timed at like Olympic events, the only thing that comes to mind for me is, and this is like way old, it was in the 90s when the Stanley Cup finally put like a chip in the puck. So as it was being played and you couldn't see it, it would light up. It would have like a a light trail that followed it, so that if you were a small child and easily distracted, you could still see what was going on with the game. What are some of the the tech applications that you've seen over the years that people might not realize are something that is a product of that mesh between tech and sport?
Yeah, I think I was gonna potentially go into this later, but we also can't
I'm
think
sorry,
of,
don't
oh
mean to
no, you're
rush you.
good. You're totally fine. So we can't think of sports as like being boxed in as well. So there's many applications. Like traditionally, people probably thought, oh, I'll go work at a sports league or ESPN or Bleacher Report or these different sports kind of media companies. But now there's pretty much different areas in every large company, particularly corporations. For example, I'm sure Meta has a whole sports division that is just devoted to that. Microsoft has a partnership with the NFL. Google has their own integrations. NBC has their own. So I think it's kind of thinking beyond that. And there's even some applications, like, just so you guys know, I think Deloitte does the scheduling for one of the leagues. So like there's things that are going on that you don't really know about ahead of time, but sports is really pervasive across different industries, as well as it's not just the visual things, that you might see on the screen. Right. So, you mentioned the puck, I mentioned the 1st and 10. Those are things that happen at the game, but there's so much that goes in beyond that. Like, how does a stream get from that camera at the game to, everywhere around the world? That's a whole component that people don't think about, as well as digital, as well as marketing. Like, these are all very complicated. And, there's a ton of, how does a press conference, how do we get live data to be one-to-one to the fan as fast as possible? Those are really, really difficult problems to solve that people probably just accept and are like, great, this comes to my screen and that's fantastic. But I think
it works so they don't have to think about it.
Right. I think for sports, you also need to think about, especially if you're looking for roles in that arena, like what are some out of the box roles that I might not be thinking about that are maybe non-traditional? That's always something to consider as well, to break into the industry.
I like that. All right, so let's talk a little bit about career planning. Did you create a career plan for yourself when you were first getting started?
I did not. I think I know, like maybe 30 years ago, that there's this whole concept of a 5-year plan. And I don't know that I'm a big proponent of creating those things. I think goals are extremely important, but I think the industry changes so much, your life changes so much, that honestly, like for me, 6 months can completely change your mindset and your point of view. So I don't know that I really believe in like a 5-year plan. I think visualizing where you want to go is still really important. And for me, knew that I was interested in a leadership track, and that was just based on, I really wanted to be a coach. I always tell people the way I coach people in engineering, that's a weird concept, but that's really a degree of what I'm doing. You could argue I'm coaching some people on this call, those different components. So I think for me, I knew I wanted to go leadership track. However, you can't just jump to that track. So there's incremental steps along the way. For me, my first job was, an entry-level software engineering job. And my initial goal was really just let me understand how ESPN works. how this job role functions and let me learn all these different components of that. And that takes a period of time. That probably took me, a year to understand. And then my next goal was, okay, how do I get promoted to the next level? And that was really the short-term goal. So I ended up going to work on an internal application that was completely different. I originally worked on ESPN.com out of college. And then the internal application actually had to do with reporters and how they got their content directly to TV and directly to social media or other digital platforms like the apps. Not really something I planned on doing, not a role that I was like, I really want this, but really was just a bigger opportunity for me from a perspective. The team was smaller. There was a lot of other considerations. And then I got into the mobile world, which I also didn't really have a desire to do initially. So I think you can plan, but life changes and things change, similar to when I was applying for jobs, planning on leaving Disney and looking for a new opportunity. I actually wanted to work remote, and I was planning on traveling around the country. And then the MBA approached me with a job. And I felt it was a really good fit and a really good opportunity. And of course, it was the only job that required an in-person presence. So you can plan as much as you want, but I think life changes really frequently. So I don't really believe in the 5-year plan, but I will say, I think it's always good to have goals, and goals change. And you have to take life as it hits you and work as it presents different opportunities. But it's more incremental goals that I really believe 3 months, 6 months is really important.
I like that. I think that's a good way to plan. You're right. People come up with these 5-year plans, and I mean, look at 2.5 years ago, the entire world changed, and it's seemingly within the span of a month. So, these are things that hopefully, God, fingers crossed, y'all, we are done with our once in a lifetime events happening for at least a couple more decades. But it is, I like the idea of, instead of coming up with like a trail map, you just come up with a list of the destinations you want to hit. And so instead of planning exactly how you're going to get there, that would give you a lot more flexibility and agility, really, to kind of like pivot depending on what's going on in your industry or in your life at the time. I think that's great. All right. So if you are advising someone to create a career plan, and we do want to stick to that very loose framework, how do you think people should go about creating one?
I think you want to first, I don't think you want to put restrictions on it. I think you want to aim for like, what is your dream role? And that also will probably change over time, but what is your dream role? And, you're arcing a career path to try to hit that, whatever that is. It can be, and don't let like industry or, expectations determine that. Like, really think about what works for you and try to go towards that. And then I think it's, okay, I'm starting at this role. I'm trying, an entry-level role out. It may put you towards that end goal, and it may not. And that's okay if it doesn't, because that you can still pivot. You can always move to another area and do something different to get to that ideal end. But I think that's how I kind of would go about it. And I think what you need to think is like, what skills can I build along the way that will add to my brand and to my resume? And sometimes that means, doing something different or uncomfortable than you thought you would do. For me, I didn't go to grad school right away after school. I actually ended up doing that because I felt really stagnant in my career, and it was a way for me to keep growing towards the direction I wanted to go without maybe being, something at my company were an opportunity. This was also during the pandemic. So, there's turmoil in the industry, maybe less opportunities, less leeway for, personal growth within a company. Can you do something outside of work to also kind of get towards that end goal? That's really important to keep in mind. It might not always come from your company. Unfortunately, that's just a reality, but there are still skills, and we live in, the internet age where there are so many skills you can learn on your computer. And so I would always keep that in mind. And that's something I've kind of kept throughout my career, is that you can learn anything realistically, and to keep keep on that learning path that gets you towards your end goal, because those will just add. Learning is one of those investments that always works long term. It's one of the few. Like money can go away, but learning, degrees, certificates, those are forever. So it's a good place to invest time and energy.
I like that. Yeah, there's a lot of people asking kind of, questions right around the same idea. Let's see. So, okay, if we're talking about, we started to identify some of those career goals that we think we want to start, visualizing for ourselves. How often do you think that we should check in on those career goals?
I would say at least once a year. So hopefully your company, and even probably more frequently than that, hopefully your company is doing some type of goal setting evaluation over a year that is a check-in point for you to be like, am I navigating towards the career growth that I want? I would say it's even more frequent than that, though. And it really depends on the role. Sometimes it'll be more frequent than others. Sometimes you're in a role that is really challenging you and pushing you, towards your dream. And then you probably are doing it every day without even realizing. It's just being reinforced that you're moving towards the right thing. But if you're not, I would say start to think about, every couple months. First, if you're unhappy, that's probably a time to check in with where your priorities lie and what your interest is in the role. But I think it's thinking about, am I still progressing towards my goal? And that means writing the goals down. That is very important, because you can see even your mindset 6 months ago, has that changed? Have I been given projects that push me towards that goal? Am I doing things that reinforce that? So I would say every couple months. And some people, as I said, they might not need to check in because it's working for them and they're learning and they feel good. And that's the best case scenario. But, it may be weekly for someone that is really unhappy at their role. And can they do incremental things to it might be outside of work, as I mentioned, to really reach where they want to go.
Lost my mute button there. Thank you. All right. So let's say we have, kind of assessed our options. We don't think that where we are currently, it's possible to move forward in the way that we want to. It used to be that people, would join an org and you'd be there for 25 to 40 years. You'd get your gold watch and then you'd retire and then you'd go play golf for, however long. But now that's not really the thing, right? There was a huge percentage of most of, at least my working life has been spent going job to job because that was what was needed to make money. So if you are trying to kind of take the best of both worlds with these models, what do you think is the right-ish amount of time that people should be thinking about switching jobs?
I'm gonna say there's not really a number, but I think 3 years is like kind of the max usually that people start to reevaluate a position. And that's normally because you've kind of covered it all in the role you're in. And so that's what I would kind of put the benchmark at. And that might not mean like moving up to another position or moving a company. It might be a lateral move. It might be, taking on a different responsibility, such as becoming a manager, or those different pieces, getting involved in an employee resource group. It could just be something simplistic, but I think there's a period of time where you basically start to either, get bored in your role or just the learning. I mean, I'm someone that likes challenge, so I get bored with roles sometimes, or I've reached an apex of what I can learn in it. And so that's usually the time I start reevaluating. Okay, I've become really good in this role. What else can I learn? Where else can I go? And it might be even like, okay, I'm going to pitch something to my boss of something the team can do. I would also say, a change in responsibility could be something as well. But I would say, 3 years, and that's not for everyone, right? There could be things in your personal life that it's better to have a smaller workload if you have young children, or those different pieces. You're taking care of your parents, whatever it is. You have to consider that as well, right? I don't think like career is always the most important. There's other things in your life that can shift priorities and be reevaluated. But I'd say most people will consider the 3-year as like probably time to move and do something different. In terms of moving companies, I would say there isn't really a timeline for that. I think you have to think about what roles, it could be within your own company, really push you and work for your goals. So I don't think like bouncing company to company necessarily, there's a timeline of that, but I think, when we talked about that career arc, usually around the 3-year mark, people want to progress in a different way. And that could be inside your company. Maybe there's an opportunity that fits, or maybe there's an opportunity outside the company that works better.
Yeah, I like that. And, honestly, that 3-year, like, kind of, it doesn't have to be a shot clock, right? If you treat it like a 3-year, sort of like a snooze of like, hey, how's everything going? Are you liking this? Are you not liking this? Because like 3 years, you would know the company fairly well. It should, for sure you would know your department pretty well. And you would have kind of an idea of whether or not those growth opportunities exist. Now, one of the things that is key when you're talking about growth opportunities, especially within a company, something that can really have a huge effect on this is your manager. So how do you advise communicating these growth expectations to your managers? And if you do, how have you done that in the past?
Yes, I think you have to communicate these things to people, because no one, is truly a mind reader. They were not going to know what you want or what you're interested in unless you voice that. And that can be, uncomfortable and difficult, but your manager, part of their job role is to support you. So you always have to remember that. And if they're not doing that, that's a bigger problem, and maybe something that goes into your considerations for why you might move to another role. That could be, something as well. But for me, I think it's always really, really important to voice what you're interested in and where you want to go. And one of the easiest ways to do that is through these career conversations that most companies have. And if they have, at least corporations, bigger enterprise companies will have documented goals. Don't take those lightly. I think that's one of the most important places that you can put in wording and goals that you have to, really push your boss in an understanding of where you want to go. And it's an easier sometimes conversation because it's a planned conversation, versus you bringing it up in a one-on-one. They might not be prepared, they might not be as engaged, and a career conversation is something they have to prepare for in a different way. And I would be very blunt about what you want. So I wouldn't, put soft language. I would say like, I'm interested in being an analyst for the Nets. This is a long-term goal that I have. And like putting that sentence, and your job, your boss's job is really to support you in that goals, whether it's inside or outside the company, whether it's moving groups. They're really supposed to be there to help you achieve the best of yourself. And for me, I always, with my direct reports, try to check in pretty frequently on, are you still happy? Are you still learning? Do you have concerns about, your day to day? Is there something we could improve? I'm sure not every single boss does that, but I think it is a little bit on the employee to bring up their concerns or their thoughts about where they want to go. And there's a psychological power in repeating something. So if you keep repeating to your boss, hey, I'm really interested in this role, they're going to remember that. So if you say it once, it might not be reinforced. But if you come every month and be like, really just checking in, I'm really interested in this product analyst role. What skill do I need to get there? Can you put me in contact with this person? Your boss is going to remember that and hopefully work on it. If someone tells you something, 5 times, you're more likely to pay attention and do it than like one time once a year. So I think that reinforcement is really, really important when it comes to talking to your boss.
Yeah, I like that, the reinforcement kind of thing. Because you're right, you might remember like, oh yeah, I told you that it was on a Tuesday and blah, blah, blah. Because like this might be the only time you're talking, the only time that you like kind of amped yourself up just to mention this to your manager. But this might also be like the 4th time they've heard something like that from a member of the team in that day. And it's not that you're not special and beautiful and a unique snowflake, and we all love you, but you got to make sure that these things are sticking, and repetition is definitely a way to do that. All right. What are some of the factors that we should be analyzing when we're considering making a career movement? We had a follow-up question to this one saying, what type of questions can we ask recruiters in order to understand if that move will contribute to our advancement goals? So as you are, let's say that you're getting kind of itchy and you want to move to a new job. What are your considerations when you are assessing potential companies to apply?
I think looking for a role that is beyond, I mean, it depends on your circumstances, but looking for something that inspires you and challenges you and you're excited about. I wouldn't just accept a role that, maybe has a compensation associated with it or something you're not passionate about, because that light will go out really quickly. So I think make sure that it's something that you can at least see yourself doing for a short period of time, or at least like 3 years. We'll stick with that benchmark, just because, moving jobs is very stressful and also a lot of additional work. So I think it's something you want to at least accept a role that's for a 3-year period. And then in terms of HR, so this is going to sound a little dicey, but I don't know that HR is the best representation of what the role is going to be for you. And the reason I say that is because you're not going to work with HR day to day. They're not going to be the person that you are interacting with and sits every day with the team. They're probably not knowledgeable of that. They're probably speaking from the MBA generally, right? They're not involved day to day. So I think connecting with the team members is really, really important in the interviews, asking questions, do I feel like this team is a cultural fit for me and that we can collaborate well? And unfortunately, interviews is never really going to tell you 100% what you're going to encounter. But I think connecting with the individual employees is really important, and asking them those questions. And hopefully through the interview process, you are meeting multiple people that on the team, people that you will be collaborating with on the day to day, because I don't think HR is really as knowledgeable on those things. So I think it's more important in the interviews with the team to really ask those questions and think about how you would fit in, and if this is a team that you would really want to work with.
Yeah, that's a really good point. You might speak the most with a recruiter or with HR before you ever, meet with the team. And so, yeah, you do want to ask these things. You do want to be taking into consideration that, yeah, HR is great, but they're not going to be the ones sitting next to you all day. So yeah, if we're in these positions and trying to figure out like what questions to ask, are there any things that you recommend asking to really get a good impression of, if a company is going to be the place for you, if they're going to support your advancement goals? What kind of questions do you usually ask recruiters, or were you, obviously before you found this job?
Yeah, I always ask about team structure and kind of what a day-to-day will look like for me. Those are 2 questions I'll always ask, just because I think it gives you kind of a good landscape of what you'll be doing. Who will I be working with frequently? And then I think it's also, if you're going to a big company, this is a little bit easier. You can kind of tell culture sometimes from how a brand presents itself, at least in terms of what values they hold or different initiatives that they're pushing, and does that fit for you? Because normally inside of the company is going to operate very similarly to their external messaging. So I think that's something to consider. And then, I think just really trying to get a feel of what a team does, how they operate, is really important, and asking those to the hiring managers. If there's something specific you're looking for in terms of growth, I think voicing that is also totally fine in the interview process as well. Like, I am looking for long-term to be in a leadership role. That is totally fine. And oftentimes the hiring manager will want that. Like, I've recruited for positions like, let's say, senior engineer, but I might already be planning, okay, I have a void on this team for someone that's interested in leadership. I only have architects, or I only have people that are interested in being an individual contributor. So those things can play a role. And I think it's totally good. And you can kind of show passion from a candidate too, if they're like, long term, I would love to be a manager at the NBA. Like then I think, okay, they're more invested. They're looking for this growth. Can I provide that growth? And a lot of times it will be a good fit for them if they're voicing that at the interview level.
I like that advice a lot. Just out of curiosity, one of the things that we've heard from, or at least I've heard, I sit on a lot of these, that I've heard from hiring managers is this idea of, people seeming more excited about the next job down the line than the one that they're applying for. And I find this a really interesting kind of dichotomy because, I fully agree with you. You can't expect people to help you get where you want to go if they don't know where you want to go. And it should be beneficial, and employers should see this as a benefit to them that you have some sort of idea of where you do want to go. So that way you're not just showing up saying like, I don't know, I guess I'm here. What do you feel about this? Have you ever had somebody talk about their long-term goals in a way that didn't hit the right note for you?
No, I don't think so. A lot of times I actually look to recruit growth candidates, so people that are very interested and maybe reaching a little bit above what their resume looks like on paper. And so they're really, challenged and interested in the current role, which is great. But I think one of the first conversations I have with my direct reports is about long-term growth and where they want to go. I've never had a candidate, I've had people say, I'm interested in management first. I want to be an architect. I want to go do this. I don't necessarily view that as a negative because I think experience is important no matter what. And as long as they're passionate, if they realistically, I have 10 people on my team right now, probably 5 of them might be in different roles within the next 3 years, right? So everything is kind of short term. And so I think as long as they're bringing passion and can do a good job at the current role, I'm totally okay with if they have future thoughts about other things they want to do.
I like that. I think that's, I very much appreciate that answer. And I think you're right. It really does show that long-term planning. It shows curiosity. It shows, that you have ambition. And that's, not everybody has that. So I think it is really important to highlight that for yourself. All right. So as we're moving forward, kind of along the journey here, what do you think makes a resume stand out? Have you ever seen anything that was like, oh my gosh, this was great?
I think it depends on where you work. So for me, if I work at the NBA, if I see something basketball related, that's going to catch my eye. And I'm definitely going to pay attention to that. So that's what I kind of talked about in the first question with having something that relates to the NBA brand. I'm going to pay attention to that, more than other candidates for sure, at least from an initial standpoint. And then really what I'm looking for, for me, I just look for someone that has the basic skills. I mean, I mostly recruit for engineering roles. And so I look for someone that has some background, basic skills in what I'm looking for, and shows some competency in that area. So, it doesn't have to be, if they have a degree in some engineering related discipline, that's great. I'll look for, how they did in school. I do pay attention to that. I think that does reflect effort to some degree. It's a good way to reflect effort. That doesn't mean have a 4.0. It just means you have some semblance of like, I care about my grades. I care about projects. I care about passion or my passions. And I think that translates well to work as well. And then if they have, they come from a non-traditional background, do they have some projects I can look at and analyze and see how it is. I'll often, if I see projects from people, I will send them to my team and be like, hey guys, or hey all, like, how does this look? What do you guys think? So I think for me, it's mostly like, do you have a connection to the brand? And that's a strategy with anything, right? With a cover letter, you should definitely talk about connection to the brand and the company. With a resume, I'm really just looking for one. I like 1-page resumes. In general, I usually don't if you make it longer, I probably just gonna skim more. So I think realistically, hiring managers are probably reading a resume for about 30 seconds max. We have way too many. Just for perspective, I posted an internship recently, and there's 2,000 applicants within like the first week and a half. So it's not, it doesn't need to be, there needs to be like surgery on the resume, but I think having some of those key things that connect to the brand is really important. That doesn't mean make a new resume for every company as well. It just means I want to apply in the sports world. Can I put something on that resume that connects me to sports? I want to apply to be a chef. Is there something relevant that I have related to cooking? Like those are important things, and those resumes should look different. But for each, if you're, you want to be in sports and you're applying to all these different sports companies, that doesn't mean you need to tailor it for each individual role.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I like that advice. And I think you highlighted something really important, which is if you know the types of roles you're going for and you know the types of companies that you're applying at, it's very possible to kind of streamline this and have like one resume that really suits a lot of them. If you are like me, or like I was several years ago, I had like 3 different resumes. I had one for being for applying for paralegal roles. I had one for just like secretarial kind of stuff, and I had another one for retail because that's what I was working. And so yeah, like I didn't have to reinvent the wheel every single time. I could just kind of pull and pick and choose from those 3 like templates, I guess, and just kind of mess around in there and tailor stuff. And I think you also hit on another point that's really important, right? That recruiters are looking at these resumes, and you might spend hours, days on your resume crafting it, but you are facing that 30 seconds of concentration. So, one of the things that I was never told in school that I try and make sure we tell people a lot now is you are writing that resume to show the hiring manager how well you fit into the role. So make them excited and curious about what you did and how on earth you were able to do that. Making that like 30-second connection is huge, and that is just not something that was ever explained to me before I started working in recruiting. So very, very important info for y'all.
Yeah, I also want to reinforce one thing. So LinkedIn or any public platform, search terms are really important. So if you are interested in a basketball role, hopefully you say basketball at least 4 to 5 times in your resume. Those different types of things truly matter. Same with if you're interested in a finance role, like using technical terms will trigger you to show up in more searches. So that's just something to consider when you're building a resume or building your LinkedIn as well. I highly recommend building your LinkedIn well, because you will show up to recruiters a lot more if you craft that in a specific way, just based off terms that you're using. I'm interested in software, I'll say software a bunch of times. I'll say engineering, I'll say computer science, whatever it is, those all trigger you to show up more frequently. And a lot of people don't really realize that.
Mm-hmm. I like that. We're getting some really great questions in here, so we are going to be able to take a couple of these. I'm sorry we won't be able to take all of them, but y'all sent in some great questions here. All right, let's talk about preparation for interviews. How do you tend to prepare, and is there any essential information that people should really make sure that they know before an interview?
I think just reviewing the job descriptions, I usually write down a few questions that I have ahead of time, just specific to the role or just general. I kind of talked about 2 questions I always ask. So I'll just keep I have a Mac, so I'll have a notes document with like questions I always ask, and then individual questions, as well as looking up the interviewer. I think that's strong. And I always recommend doing that because you don't know, you might have a connection, and that's an easy way to soften the conversation. So, I see this person's from New York City. Oh, easy. I'm from New York City. I can be like, where did you grow up? What high school did you go to? All those different things. It just kind of creates a connection with someone. And interviews are honestly more about human connection than skills in a lot of ways. So I think that's really important. And then, I believe in the look good, feel good concept. So making sure that you are feeling good about yourself, you're well rested, you've ate, you have coffee, whatever it is, you're in a good space that's conducive for you to perform an interview, right? If you're in a coffee shop with 12 million things going on, it's going to be more difficult for you to have that interview. So I think those are kind of some of the ways I generally prepare. And then what I do is if I'm going through an interview circuit, I'll write down questions that they ask me. So if I don't know something, the next interview, I might, look something up in between or consider that question and how I would answer it. As well as if it's your first interview, you should go through the bucket of behavioral questions everyone asks. What's a challenge you face and how did you handle it? What are some positives about yourself? What are some negatives? All those different things. You should have kind of planned answers for those ahead of time so that it's less stressful for you because you've prepared.
So sorry, my cord got unplugged from the wall and I got a low power announcement from my battery that made me panic. All right. Okay, 10 minutes left here. I want to make sure we get to a couple more questions. This one we just got that came in from the chat here. Here we go. This person had wanted to know, you previously mentioned the NBA schedule is year-round, not just during NBA season. Are there different departments such as Summer League, G League, and WNBA separated, or is there crossover throughout the teams? Can you answer this for us, or is this maybe outside of your department?
I can answer that. So it's a mix of both. There are certain marketing extends to kind of everything. Finance extends to everything. Digital experience, there's some crossover and in other areas there isn't. So it kind of depends. There's not really, I wouldn't say there's like roles specific to at least like Summer League. I don't think there's any person that's like just doing Summer League. But I would say the G League has individual employees as well as WNBA does. So it's kind of a mix and those are good opportunities to break in, less popular, right? So obviously the NBA, I know someone, it's a good story. Someone I went to high school with, they just left the NBA, but they used to work here and they're a huge Knicks fan. And they saw this role open on the Nets and they had a really hard time like wrapping their head around working for another team. But that's what enabled them to get to the NBA was by taking that opportunity. And eventually working, they did a really cool job at the NBA with merchandise and worked on partnerships with Nike and those different things. So sometimes it's taking something that you wouldn't necessarily really see yourself doing. Like, let's say you're a huge basketball fan, but there's an NHL role open. Like you should think about those things. It doesn't have to be perfect to start. You can still get where you want to go.
Yeah, I like that, to kind of like get your foot in the door of the industry. Yeah, that's wonderful. Did your friend feel like a wolf in sheep's clothing, like going to work every day thinking like, this is not my fandom?
Yeah, I think so. But eventually I think it made them be more of a Nets fan. It's hard when you're in that environment, right? Like even if you're not a huge NBA fan, if you work at the NBA, you kind of you're around it so much that it just becomes part of your life.
Yeah, of course. Okay, let's see here. Oh, okay. So this person said, I currently work at one of the top 5 social media platforms, but I would love to work for the NBA. I don't have an advanced degree. Do a lot of NBA employees tend to have graduate degrees? What have you seen?
Yeah, I think it's a mix. I think, and it depends on what industry you're in. So most people, I wouldn't say most people in general. No, I think there are certain popular ones. So if you're in the business realm, a lot of people will go for an MBA. And one of the reasons for that is the MBA has an educational program. So people will partner with that where they give you a percentage of money a year to spend on education. I got a master's degree more for my own growth, for perspective in my group. I think I'm one of the only people that has even they might have an advanced degree, but it's in something completely different than what's really relevant to the role. So I would not say that's the majority. I mean, maybe it's 20%. That's probably still too high. So I wouldn't let that ever keep you from applying to a specific role.
I like that. Okay. This last one you may or may not be able to answer. It's a little bit more general, a hiring question. But since headquarters and operations are located in New York, does the NBA offer remote positions for those who are passionate and want to contribute, but are limited to their geographical location? So do you have any knowledge of that for us?
Yes, so it's a mix. My department is actually, they let everyone pick remote or not, that you got to pick remote, hybrid, or in person all the time. Not every department is like that. So there are certain roles that require a bigger in-person presence. So it's going to depend, and most of the job postings will describe that. And I think that's definitely something to ask in your interview. Even if it says it's not remote, like that's something you should definitely propose and ask to a hiring manager, because they might be more flexible. They might just want a commitment of, oh, you'll come 4 times a year or something like that. It's a good conversation to bring up around expectations of that, because there isn't a like one size fits all for every role at the MBA.
Yeah. Okay, cool. We did also get another question, just kind of last minute. Is it frowned upon to apply for more than one role within the NBA? We get this question a lot from people who either have like, varied interests, or they want a role with that company so bad that they'll, apply to a bunch of different entry level ones. How does that work within the NBA? What do you guys feel like if you see somebody applying to multiple roles?
I don't know that I've ever seen that, to be honest. So it hasn't come up where that's a problem, but I have interviewed candidates from, basically someone interviewed for a like G League front end role, and they didn't actually get selected, but that team was like, we have this good candidate. We didn't ultimately pick them for the one role we had open, but you have other roles open. Would you want them to interview for your team? So I have done that before, and I'm totally open to that. And honestly, I think apply to everything, just because it's difficult to signal in on a role. And if you have teams fighting over you, that's probably a really good case scenario. You're more likely to get hired, in my opinion. It's more about your skills than anything else, and then you get to be a little bit more of the decision maker. So I would still, when I apply to jobs, I just apply to whatever I'm interested in or fits. I don't really pay attention to only this one role at a company. They're big enough where it should be totally fine.
Yeah, makes a ton of sense. I like that. Okay, one last question before we go into our final slide here. Do you believe that the sports industry is still very male dominated environment? And if so, what is some of your advice to help female professionals to navigate this industry?
Yeah, I think definitely percentage wise, it's low for women. I think one of the things you can do is, if you are in the sports industry, to pass it on, pay attention to all diversity goals and aims with hiring and retaining. That's also really important. So I think pay it forward is really big. And I think for advice, I think the biggest thing is to still be yourself and focus on the work. Because at the end of the day, if you're good at what you do, the distraction of maybe what you look like is less important, because you're just so proficient in your role, as well as you have passion for the brand. That's going to shine a lot more. So I think focusing on that, taking it out of the what you look like sector, is always really important, and just making it about the work is the best case scenario. And then building confidence, always super important in every role, is to build confidence over time and have little wins, have little goals that you're focused on, and just focus on you. I would say focus on what you can do to be better, and what you can do to advance in your career is always a good mindset to have in difficult situations. I think Meg froze.
Yes, I think so. Okay. So let's see if she's going to come back soon. If not, I think we're going to be in the end of this amazing chat and learn. Shannon, thank you so much for this time with you. This was huge for me also, because I was kind of hearing you and everything, and it was so amazing about your experience and everything. So thank you all for being here. Thank you, Shannon, again. And please don't forget to watch all our events we have and upcoming events we're going to have. And yeah, thank you all for being here. Shannon, any last words you would like to share?
Yeah, I just want to thank everyone from joining. This is like a small step, and this is a good opportunity to learn different things, not just from me, from other people, read books, watch TED Talks, all those different things can contribute to your learning. And I just want to do a small plug for my MBA background. So just so you guys know, we've relaunched the digital experience across all devices, not just connected, mobile and web as well. We also have a specific promotion tonight where if you sign up for MBA ID, which is our membership program, you can watch all the games free tonight. So definitely check that out. And I really appreciate everyone's questions and energy.
Amazing. Thank you, Shannon. Thank you all for being here. Have a nice evening and day.